galaxy had always operated on principles: gravity, thermodynamics, causality. But in the infinite permutations of space and time, even the most fundamental laws could intersect in unexpected ways. When the USS Enterprise's experimental warp coil overloaded during an ion storm in the neutral zone, it created a subspace tear that never should have existed. And when that tear briefly touched a hyperspace lane in an entirely different reality, it seized the only matter caught between dimensions. One Vulcan science officer, mid-molecular transport. Spock materialized 3 feet above burning sand and dropped hard. Twin suns blazed overhead with unfamiliar spectral signatures, G-type and K-type binary system. His mind cataloged automatically even as pain registered from the impact. The transporter pattern had held, but environmental conditions were severe. 43.3 degrees Celsius, humidity at 7%, atmospheric composition similar to Earth, but with trace elements his tricorder couldn't immediately identify. The tricorder. He checked, still functional, though displaying concerning energy readings it classified as unknown phenomena, non-baryonic interference. His phaser remained secured to his belt, power cell at 73%. No communicator signal reached the Enterprise. Logical conclusion: he was no longer in Federation space. The spectroscopic analysis of those twin suns confirmed it. This binary system existed nowhere in Starfleet's comprehensive stellar cartography. Spock stood, brushing ochre sand from his blue science uniform, and surveyed the endless dunes. In the distance, rocky formations suggested canyons. His Vulcan physiology could withstand this desert environment longer than most species, but even he required water within 72 hours. Shelter and information were the immediate priorities. A distant engine roar drew his attention. Spock's enhanced hearing detected repulsor technology, primitive by Federation standards but functional. A boxy transport vehicle crested a dune, its hull pitted with age and poorly maintained. 2 humanoid figures rode atop it, swathed in desert wrappings. They spotted him immediately. The vehicle altered course, approaching with what Spock's tactical assessment suggested was curiosity rather than hostility. As it slowed, one figure called out in a language his universal translator couldn't process because he'd never loaded it into the device. The phonemes were entirely foreign. The second figure spoke, this time in what Spock recognized as a trade pidgin, incorporating elements similar to ancient Earth languages. You, lost, dangerous, walking dune sea alone. I require transportation to the nearest settlement, Spock replied in Standard, then attempted the pidgin himself. I am displaced. I seek information. The 2 figures exchanged glances. One gestured at Spock's uniform. Strange clothes. You escaped from somewhere? Spice smuggler caught by Hutts. I am not a criminal. I am a science officer experiencing technical difficulties. Spock paused, recognizing they had no framework for understanding Starfleet. I need passage to civilization. I can compensate. The first figure laughed. Compensate? What you got, off-worlder? You look broke. Spock withdrew his tricorder. Its smooth Federation design, blinking lights, and clear technological sophistication made both scavengers lean forward with sudden interest. This device contains significant scientific data. However, I am willing to negotiate for transportation only. Mos Eisley, the second figure said quickly. We take you. 30 credits. Spock had no credits, but calculated that reaching civilization was worth the deception. Acceptable. I will obtain credits upon arrival. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The ride lasted 47 minutes by Spock's chronometer. His escorts, scavengers named Tekken and Brule, explained they harvested valuable scrap from crashed ships in the Dune Sea. This planet was Tatooine, they said, a worthless desert world on the outer rim. The terms meant nothing to Spock, but he filed them away. The Galactic Empire controlled most civilized space. There was a rebellion. Recently, something called a Death Star had been destroyed. Spock's eyebrow rose at that name. Any military installation that warranted being called a Death Star suggested troubling priorities. When Mos Eisley's squat buildings appeared on the horizon, Spock's tricorder registered over 50,000 life signs and technological signatures that defied his understanding. Energy weapons operating on principles that weren't plasma-based, propulsion systems that created spatial distortions unlike warp fields, and something else. An energy reading so pervasive it registered across every living being in the city, yet his tricorder couldn't classify it. Fascinating. Mos Eisley assaulted Spock's senses with calculated chaos. The spaceport sprawled across the desert like an organism that had grown rather than been planned. Cantinas beside starship hangars, market stalls pressed against what his tricorder identified as primitive weapons dealers, aliens of dozens of species moving through narrow streets with the practiced wariness of a frontier settlement. Spock had visited many worlds, but this place operated on social dynamics he found highly inefficient. 3 armed confrontations occurred within visual range during his first 10 minutes in the city. No apparent law enforcement responded. Tekken and Brule had deposited him at the spaceport's edge with increasingly aggressive demands for payment. Spock had used the Vulcan nerve pinch on Brule when the scavenger drew a crude projectile weapon, then applied it to Tekken before he could raise an alarm. Both would wake in approximately 20 minutes with no lasting damage and a neurological discouragement from pursuing him. Violence was regrettable, but logical given the circumstances. He moved through the crowds, attracting stares. His Vulcan features, pointed ears, upswept eyebrows, distinctly angular bone structure, marked him as unusual even in this diverse population. Several aliens gave him a wide berth. One humanoid with extensive cybernetic implants muttered something about "never seen that species before." Spock's immediate objectives were clear: secure local currency, obtain information about this galaxy's political structure and technological level, and locate whoever controlled interstellar transportation. Return to Federation space was theoretically impossible without understanding how he'd arrived, but establishing baseline data was logical regardless. A cantina ahead displayed a sign in multiple languages. Spock's linguistic analysis recognized patterns similar to both Latin and Cyrillic alphabets, though the actual words were foreign. The establishment's clientele included various species, several of whom carried visible weapons. This was clearly a social hub. He entered. The cantina was dark, filled with smoke from substances his tricorder tagged as mildly narcotic. A band played music using instruments that produced tones his Vulcan hearing found discordant. Dozens of patrons occupied booths and tables, conducting business with the casual tension of people accustomed to violence. The bartender, a humanoid with thick jowls and suspicious eyes, looked Spock over. "We don't serve your kind here." An illogical statement. "You are unfamiliar with my species. How can you have a policy regarding no droids? Your kind. Out." Spock's confusion lasted 1.3 seconds before he recognized the insult. The bartender had mistaken his logical demeanor for artificial intelligence. "I am not a droid. I am Vulcan, a biological organism." The bartender squinted. "Never heard of Vulcans? You got credits?" "I do not. However, I possess technological items of significant value that could be..." A hand clamped on Spock's shoulder. He turned to find a Rhodian. green-skinned, multifaceted eyes, antennae, pointing what was unmistakably an energy weapon at his midsection. The alien spoke in a chittering language, gesturing with the weapon toward the door. Spock calculated his options. The Rhodian stood too close for the nerve pinch without risk of the weapon discharging. The cantina's other patrons were watching with the interest of spectators, not interveners. Violence appeared to be an accepted social dynamic. "I do not seek confrontation," Spock said evenly. The Rhodian chittered again, more aggressively. Several patrons shifted, hands moving toward their own weapons. Spock recognized the social dynamic. Showing weakness invited predation in this environment. Then the energy vanished from the room like air from a decompression chamber. A figure in a dark robe stood near the cantina's entrance. Human male, approximately 65 years old, with weathered features and eyes that reflected knowledge Spock's tricorder reading couldn't quantify. The mysterious energy reading spiked dramatically around this individual, the same pervasive phenomenon he'd detected across the city, but concentrated, focused, controlled. "The Rhodian will leave you alone," the old man said quietly. The Rhodian's weapon lowered. His posture shifted from aggressive to confused. Then he turned and walked toward the exit without another sound. Spock's eyebrow rose. "You employed some form of neurological manipulation. My tricorder detects energy fluctuations consistent with your vocalization, but the mechanism is not technology," the old man interrupted, approaching Spock with cautious steps. "The Force. And you're unlike anyone I've sensed in decades. Your mind is..." He paused, studying Spock with an intensity that suggested analysis beyond visual observation. "Shielded, disciplined, but not through the Force. How is that possible?" "I do not understand your terminology," Spock replied. "However, I am Vulcan. We train from childhood in mental disciplines for telepathic control and emotional suppression. If you are detecting my neural patterns, you possess psionic abilities." The old man's eyes widened fractionally. "Telepathic? You're telepathic?" "All Vulcans possess varying degrees of touch telepathy. I am capable of mind melds, a technique for sharing thoughts and memories through direct neural contact." Spock paused. "You are familiar with telepathy. The Force grants some that ability, but it requires training, attunement, and..." The old man shook his head slowly. "You truly don't know where you are, do you? Come, we shouldn't talk here." Spock evaluated the situation. This individual had demonstrated abilities his science couldn't immediately explain, possessed information Spock required, and had intervened on his behalf. The logical choice was cooperation. "I accept. However, I require data on this planet's political structure, available transportation, and the nature of the energy phenomenon you call the Force." The old man's weathered face creased into something between a smile and concern. "My name is Tion Solusar. Once I was a Jedi historian, and if you truly don't know what the Force is, Vulcan, then you've stumbled into a galaxy far more dangerous than you can possibly comprehend." Tion's dwelling was a small structure carved into Mos Eisley's canyon edge, its interior cluttered with data pads, ancient texts sealed in protective cases, and technological fragments that predated any Federation archaeology Spock had studied. The Jedi historian moved with the careful precision of someone accustomed to hiding, checking the entrance twice before sealing it with a mechanical lock that would have been primitive by Starfleet standards, but showed clever engineering. "Sit," Tion gestured to a worn cushion. "I'll answer what I can, but first, how did you arrive on Tatooine? This world is remote. Your species isn't in any database I've ever accessed." Spock remained standing, tricorder in hand, scanning the room. The energy readings were extraordinary, concentrated in several artifacts Tian had carefully arranged on shelves. I experienced a transporter malfunction during a subspace anomaly. I was separated from my vessel and deposited in this galaxy through mechanisms I do not yet understand. Based on stellar cartography analysis, I am no longer in Federation space. In fact, I may no longer be in my reality of origin. Tian's hand trembled slightly as he poured water from a sealed container. Other realities. The Force grants visions, but I've never heard of anyone crossing between... No, wait. He moved to a shelf, pulling down a crystalline object that pulsed with faint blue light. This is a holocron, ancient Jedi technology. There are legends, very old legends, of the world between worlds. A vergence in the Force that exists outside normal space and time, but those are stories. In my experience, legends often contain factual foundations obscured by cultural interpretation. Spock's tricorder focused on the holocron. That device generates a quantum field I cannot classify. The energy signature is consistent with biological neural patterns, yet it emanates from crystalline circuitry. Fascinating. You can detect the Force? Tian looked genuinely shocked. That device you carry? My tricorder measures multiple spectra of energy, subatomic particles, and electromagnetic fields. This Force you reference appears to register as an omnipresent energy field with properties similar to both quantum entanglement and neural electrical patterns. However, my device classifies it as non-baryonic matter, with characteristics that contradict established physical laws. Tian sat down slowly, studying Spock with renewed intensity. You analyze the Force like it's just another natural phenomenon. All phenomena are natural by definition, unless you are suggesting this Force is supernatural, which would be scientifically untenable. Spock paused. You indicated you are a Jedi historian. Please define this term. The old man's expression grew distant, pained. The Jedi Order were guardians of peace and justice for over 1,000 generations. We served the Galactic Republic using the Force, which binds all living things, to defend the innocent and maintain balance. But 19 years ago, the Jedi were betrayed. The Republic fell, the Galactic Empire rose in its place, and the Emperor hunted us to near extinction. Spock processed this information. A millennium-spanning organization eliminated in 19 years. That suggests either severe structural vulnerability or overwhelming tactical superiority from your adversaries. Both, Tian said bitterly. We were betrayed from within. The Sith, dark side users who'd hidden for generations, engineered our destruction. And now the Emperor and his servant, Darth Vader, rule through fear and military might. The name triggered recognition from the Scavenger's earlier conversation. The military force that recently lost a battle station designated Death Star. Tian actually smiled. You heard? Yes, the Rebel Alliance destroyed it. A small victory, but the first real hope in years. The boy who fired the shot. There are rumors he's strong in the Force, perhaps even trained by... He stopped abruptly, suspicion flashing across his features. Why am I telling you this? You could be an Imperial spy. I am not. I am a Starfleet officer bound by principles of non-interference in pre-warp civilizations. However, I require information to survive. Spock met Tian's gaze directly. You mentioned the Force binds all living things. Does this suggest a biological or metaphysical connection? Both. All life generates the Force and is connected through it. Some beings, those strong in the Force, can sense it, manipulate it, even see across time through it. The Jedi taught that it has a will, a balance between light and dark. Spock's analytical mind engaged with the concept. A universal energy field generated by life itself would explain the omnipresent readings. However, the concept of intentionality, a will, introduces variables outside scientific methodology. I would require significant data to... The door exploded inward. Spock's Vulcan reflexes saved him. He dropped behind Tion's work table as white armored soldiers poured through the entrance, energy weapons raised. Stormtroopers, his mind supplied the term from Tion's earlier context. Imperial forces. Hands visible, do not resist, the lead soldier commanded. Tion raised his hands slowly, but Spock noted the old man's eyes darting toward a concealed compartment in the wall. Weapon storage, most likely. Spock calculated tactical options. His phaser was set to stun, effective range 12 meters against approximately 6 hostiles in confined space. However, he lacked understanding of their armor's defensive capabilities. The lead stormtrooper pointed his weapon directly at Spock. Unknown alien species. Scan indicates non-human biology. Imperial census has no record of your kind. You will come with us for processing. On what legal grounds? Spock asked evenly. Imperial Decree 77B. All unregistered alien species are subject to mandatory classification. Resistance will be met with lethal force. Xenophobic legal framework, Spock analyzed. The Empire Tion described operated on principles fundamentally opposed to Federation values. He could cooperate and likely face imprisonment or experimentation, or he could resist and confirm himself as a threat. The logical choice was surprisingly clear. Spock's hand moved with Vulcan speed, drawing his phaser and firing 3 consecutive stun blasts before the stormtroopers could fully track his movement. The blue energy beams struck 3 soldiers who collapsed instantly, unconscious but unharmed. The remaining 3 opened fire. Bolts of red energy, Spock's mind registered them as plasma-based weaponry, scorched the walls where he'd been standing. He rolled behind a stone pillar, noting the energy dissipation pattern. Less powerful than Federation phasers, but still lethal. Tion moved. The old man's hand extended, and one stormtrooper's weapon flew from his grasp as if pulled by invisible wire. The Force, directed telekinesis. The soldier stumbled backward in confusion. Spock emerged from cover, closing distance with Vulcan speed. His hand found the nerve cluster at the base of the nearest trooper's neck through a gap in the armor. The soldier crumpled. The final trooper swung his weapon towards Spock, but Tion made a subtle gesture, and the man's arms locked to his sides as if bound by unseen restraints. "Sleep," Tion whispered, and the trooper collapsed. Silence fell. Spock checked his phaser. Power cell at 61%. 6 Imperial soldiers neutralized without fatalities. Efficient. Tion was already moving, pulling data chips from a hidden safe. They tracked me. Probably detected the holocron's energy signature when I activated it. We have minutes before reinforcements arrive. Then we should leave separately to reduce... No. Tion fixed Spock with an intense stare. You don't understand. They saw you. A completely unknown species with technology they can't identify. The Empire will dedicate significant resources to capturing you. They'll classify you as a potential biological weapon or test your physiology for military applications. Spock found this assessment logical, given the limited data. You suggest alliance? I suggest you need someone who understands this galaxy, and I need someone who can think clearly about the Force without the weight of 2 decades of grief and fear. Tion grabbed a worn cloak. There's a rebel cell operating in the Outer Rim. They have resources, ships, and most importantly, they oppose the Empire. Given your situation, that makes them your best option for survival. I do not make political alliances hastily. The Prime Directive forbids. Your Federation isn't here, Vulcan, and the Empire is. Tion gestured at the unconscious stormtroopers. You just assaulted Imperial forces. Whether you intended it or not, you've chosen a side. Spock considered the logic. He had indeed initiated combat against representatives of this galaxy's dominant government. His presence complicated local political dynamics. The ethical implications were significant, but survival took precedence. I will accompany you to these rebels. However, I make no commitment beyond gathering information. Tion almost smiled. That's all I ask. Now move. There's a transport leaving in 20 minutes, and we need to be on it. The transport was a YT-1300 light freighter that had clearly exceeded its recommended operational lifespan by several decades. Spock's engineering assessment identified at least 17 critical system vulnerabilities within 30 seconds of boarding. Yet the crew, a Duros pilot named Shreve and his Twi'lek co-pilot Nava, treated the vessel with the casual confidence of people accustomed to making failing technology function through improvisation and necessity. Clearance codes are expired, Shreve muttered, manipulating the control interface with four-fingered hands. Imperial checkpoint is going to flag us. Then we don't use the checkpoint, Nava replied, her leku twitching with what Spock recognized as agitation. Take the smuggler's route through the canyon. In daylight, scanners will pick us up before we're clear of atmosphere. Spock observed from the crew compartment, his tricorder documenting every system signature. The propulsion technology operated on principles his physics training couldn't immediately classify. Not matter-antimatter reactions, not fusion, but something involving exotic particles his tricorder labeled as hypermatter. The faster-than-light system appeared to function by translating the ship into a parallel dimension the crew called hyperspace. Fascinating, and completely inconsistent with established theories of space-time physics. Tion sat beside him, carefully packing the holocron and several ancient texts into a protective case. The old Jedi had remained silent during their rushed journey through Mos Eisley's back alleys, guiding Spock through maintenance tunnels and across rooftops to reach the spaceport. They'd encountered 2 additional Imperial patrols, both of which Tion had manipulated through the Force, making soldiers look the wrong direction, forget what they'd seen, or simply become overwhelmingly compelled to investigate elsewhere. Spock had documented each instance with his tricorder. The energy patterns were consistent but varied in intensity based on Tion's apparent concentration and the complexity of the manipulation. A form of directed psionic influence, but operating through mechanisms his technology couldn't fully quantify. You're analyzing everything, Tion observed quietly. Even now, when we're minutes from being caught, you're taking measurements. Information gathering is logical, regardless of circumstance. My survival may depend on understanding this galaxy's fundamental principles. Spock paused. Your abilities, this force manipulation, appears to require conscious effort and has limits. The soldiers in your dwelling resisted briefly. This suggests willpower or mental discipline can counter the effect. Tion's expression grew thoughtful. Force-sensitive beings can resist mind tricks, yes, and anyone with sufficient mental training might shake off subtle influences. But you, he gestured at Spock's tricorder, you're approaching the Force like a science experiment. That's not how it works. All phenomena can be approached scientifically. The fact that your culture has developed metaphysical frameworks around this Force does not preclude empirical analysis. The Force isn't just energy, Spock. It has intention, balance. The light side represents peace, knowledge, serenity. The dark side feeds on passion, anger, fear. Using the Force requires being in harmony with it, not just understanding its mechanics. Spock found this framework philosophically intriguing. You describe the Force as possessing moral characteristics. This is illogical. Energy cannot be inherently moral or immoral. Only its application can be judged ethically. That's what the Sith believe, that the Force is simply a tool to be used, and that belief, Tion's voice hardened. That belief led to genocide. Before Spock could respond, Nava called back from the cockpit. "We've got company. 2 TIE fighters inbound. Imperial signature." Shrav cursed in a language Spock didn't recognize. The freighter lurched as the pilot initiated evasive maneuvers. Through the viewport, Spock observed 2 angular craft with distinctive hexagonal wings converging on their position. His tricorder registered their energy signatures: compact fusion reactors, twin laser cannons, high maneuverability but minimal defensive shielding. "They're hailing," Nava reported, "ordering us to land immediately for inspection." "Not happening," Shreve growled. "Hold on. This is going to be rough." The freighter dove toward Tatooine's surface, engines screaming. The TIE fighters matched the maneuver, opening fire. Red energy bolts streaked past the viewport, several impacting the freighter's rear shields. The entire ship shuddered. "Shields at 60%, Nava called out. "We can't take many hits." Spock moved toward the cockpit. "Your defensive capabilities are insufficient. The optimal strategy is to disable their targeting systems through precision countermeasures." "We don't have countermeasures," Shreve shot back. "This isn't a military vessel." "Then allow me." Spock slid into the auxiliary station, his hands moving across the unfamiliar interface with practiced efficiency. The control language was foreign, but the underlying logic of shipboard systems was universal. Navigation, weapons, shields. He located the targeting computer within seconds. "What are you doing?" Nava demanded as Spock began redirecting power flows. "Improvising." Spock's fingers danced across the console. The freighter's sensor suite was primitive but functional. He could track the TIE fighters' approach vectors, calculate their firing solutions, and... yes, there. The freighter's dorsal laser cannon activated, swiveling toward the lead TIE fighter. Spock's targeting solution accounted for the enemy craft's velocity, trajectory, and the freighter's own evasive movements. He fired 3 precisely timed bursts. The first shot missed. The second struck the TIE fighter's port solar panel, causing the craft to spin. The third shot destroyed its companion entirely in a brief fireball. "Direct hit," Shreve whooped. "Who taught you to shoot like that?" "No one. I calculated the optimal firing solution based on observed variables." Spock tracked the damaged TIE fighter as it spiraled away, no longer pursuing. The craft's maneuverability is impressive, but the pilots rely on direct visual targeting rather than computer-assisted solutions. Exploiting this weakness is straightforward. Tion was staring at him with an expression Spock couldn't quite identify. "You've never flown before, never used these weapons, but you just adapted. Yes, it is what I do." The freighter broke atmosphere, stars filling the viewport as Tatooine's gravity well released them. Shreve immediately engaged the hyperdrive, and the stars stretched into lines as the ship translated into hyperspace. In the sudden calm, Nava turned in her seat. "All right. Who are you, really? Tion said you needed transport to the Rebel rendezvous, but he didn't mention you were some kind of tactical genius." "I am a science officer," Spock replied simply. "Tactical analysis is among my duties. However, I am not affiliated with your rebellion. I require information and potentially assistance in returning to my point of origin." "Point of origin? You mean your home world?" "I mean my reality of origin. I am not native to this galaxy." Shreve and Nava exchanged looks. The Duros pilot shook his head slowly. Tion, you picked up a crazy person. He's not crazy, Tion said quietly. I've sensed his mind through the Force. He's telling the truth, or at least what he believes is truth. And after what I just witnessed, the old Jedi met Spock's eyes. The rebellion has Force sensitives, scientists, strategists, but they've never encountered anyone like you, someone who can look at the Force and see data, who can outthink Imperial tactics with pure logic. You're suggesting my presence has strategic value to your rebellion. I'm suggesting that if the Empire captures you, they'll either dissect you to understand your biology or force you to work for them. The rebellion offers a third option: freedom, resources, and people who might help you find your way home. Spock considered this. The logical analysis was clear. Alone in an unfamiliar galaxy, lacking resources or local knowledge, his survival probability was low. Aligning with a faction that opposed the xenophobic, authoritarian empire increased those odds significantly. Moreover, the ethical principles Tion had described regarding the rebellion, fighting for freedom against tyranny, aligned more closely with Federation values than the Empire's actions. However, the Prime Directive remained. His interference in local political dynamics could have unforeseen consequences, yet he had already interfered by defending himself against Imperial forces. The non-interference principle had been compromised the moment he arrived. I will meet with your rebels, Spock decided. I will evaluate their objectives, methods, and philosophical principles. If their cause aligns with logical, ethical frameworks, I may offer limited assistance in exchange for information and resources. Tion smiled slightly. Fair enough. Though I suspect once you meet them, once you see what the Empire has done to this galaxy, your logic will lead you to the same conclusion your ethics would. We shall see, Spock replied. Through the viewport, hyperspace streamed past, a tunnel of light that defied everything Spock understood about physics. Somewhere in this strange galaxy, answers waited, and perhaps, if he applied sufficient analysis, he could solve the equation of his own displacement and return home. But first, he needed to understand what he had been drawn into. This rebellion, this empire, and most importantly, this force that everyone insisted transcended logic itself. He would prove them wrong. Everything could be understood. Everything was logical if you looked at it from the right perspective. The rebel base occupied an asteroid hollowed out generations ago by mining operations. Its interior converted into a labyrinth of command centers, barracks, and maintenance bays. The Redemption's Hope, as Shreve's freighter was optimistically named, docked alongside a dozen other vessels ranging from converted civilian transports to scarred starfighters bearing the Rebellion's distinctive insignia. Spock's tricorder registered 847 life signs within the facility, diverse species composition, and energy signatures suggesting both military and civilian populations coexisting in tight quarters. Inefficient but logical for a resistance movement operating with limited resources and constant mobility requirements. Stay close, Tion advised as they disembarked. Rebels are suspicious of strangers, especially non-humans the Empire might have sent as infiltrators. The Empire practices xenophobia. Sending a non-human infiltrator would be tactically contradictory. You'd think so, but paranoia keeps people alive out here. They were met by two guards, a human woman with a blaster rifle and a Mon Calamari male whose bulbous eyes tracked Spock with evident curiosity. After brief discussion with Tion, during which the old Jedi produced identification codes and offered abbreviated explanations, they were escorted deeper into the facility. The command center was organized chaos. Holographic displays showed star charts, Imperial fleet movements, and what Spock recognized as tactical simulations. Officers, many appearing barely out of adolescence by human standards, coordinated supply lines, intelligence reports, and military operations with the desperate efficiency of people fighting a war they were losing. A human woman in her mid-40s approached, her bearing suggesting military command despite the lack of formal uniform. Her eyes were sharp, assessing Spock in the 3 seconds it took to cross the distance between them. "Tion Solusar, we thought you were dead." Her voice carried authority tempered by genuine relief. "The Empire raided your safe house on Eriadu 2 months ago." "I wasn't there, General Syndulla. I've been moving between Outer Rim worlds, staying ahead of Inquisitors." Tion gestured toward Spock. "I brought someone who needs to speak with your command staff. This is Spock. He's not from around here." General Syndulla's green skin and Leku identified her as Twi'lek, same species as Nava. Her tactical assessment of Spock was immediate and thorough. "Species unknown, technology unknown." She nodded at his tricorder and phaser. "Either you're from a region so remote we've never encountered your people, or Tion's being cryptic about something important." "The latter," Spock replied. "I am not native to this galaxy. I was displaced here through circumstances I do not fully understand. However, I possess technical and tactical capabilities that may be relevant to your operations, and I require information that your organization may be able to provide." Syndulla's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "Not native to this galaxy. That's either the most elaborate cover story I've ever heard, or..." She looked at Tion. "You believe him?" "I've touched his mind through the Force. What I sensed, it's like nothing in this galaxy. His mental discipline is absolute. No deception, no dark side corruption, just..." Tion paused. "Pure logic. It's almost alien in itself." "Vulcans suppress emotion through rigorous mental training," Spock explained. "It allows for rational decision-making uncompromised by fear, anger, or prejudice. In my culture, this is considered the foundation of civilization." A young human male approached, early 20s, sandy-haired, with an energy about him that Spock's tricorder immediately flagged as anomalous. The Force readings around this individual were extraordinary, far exceeding even Tion's signature. Untrained, chaotic, but immensely powerful. A species without emotion. The young man's tone was curious rather than challenging. "How does that work? Don't you need feelings to..." "I don't know, care about things." "Emotions exist," Spock clarified. "We simply control them rather than allowing them to control us. Logic and emotion are not mutually exclusive. Logic simply takes precedence in decision-making." The young man extended his hand. "I'm Luke Skywalker, and I think we could use someone who thinks logically around here. Most of our plans involve a lot of hoping things work out." Spock recognized the name from Tion's earlier mention, the pilot who destroyed the Death Star. He accepted the handshake, firm grip, calloused hands suggesting manual labor background. "Your recent victory required significant piloting skill and precision timing. That suggests tactical planning, not merely hope." Luke grinned. "Well, I had help. The Force guided me." "The Force is a phenomenon, not a sentient guide. It cannot make tactical decisions." "That's where you're wrong," Luke replied, though his tone remained friendly. "The Force isn't just energy, it's..." "Philosophical debates later," Syndulla interrupted. "Right now, I need to understand what we're dealing with." She fixed Spock with a commander's stare. "You say you have tactical capabilities. Prove it." "We've been tracking an Imperial supply convoy that's been hitting Outer Rim colonies. 6 ships, destroyer escort, standard patrol route. Every simulation we've run ends with unacceptable casualty rates. You claim logic. Show me." Spock found this approach reasonable. "I require complete data on the convoy composition, route specifications, available rebel assets, and tactical parameters." Syndulla gestured toward a holographic display. Within seconds, the requested information materialized. Three-dimensional representations of Imperial vessels, asteroid field terrain, patrol schedules, and rebel fighter complements. Primitive holography by Federation standards, but functional. Spock studied the data for 47 seconds. Your simulations failed because you approached this as a direct military engagement. The convoy's destroyer provides overwhelming firepower advantage. However, destroyers have specific vulnerabilities. Spock manipulated the display, highlighting sections of the Imperial vessel. The shield generators are positioned dorsally. Standard Imperial doctrine assumes threats from the plane of battle. If your fighters approached from below the destroyer's ventral surface, using the asteroid field for cover, you could achieve firing solutions on the unshielded hangar bay before they scrambled TIE fighters. He continued, fingers moving across the interface with increasing familiarity. Simultaneously, a small team infiltrates the lead freighter, here where sensor coverage overlaps, and transmits false distress signals indicating rebel capital ships approaching. Standard Imperial response protocols will prioritize capital ship threats over fighter attacks. The destroyer will break formation to engage targets that don't exist, leaving the convoy vulnerable for precisely 4.7 minutes. Sufficient time to disable their engines and force surrender. The command center had gone silent. Officers stared at the tactical display where Spock had completely restructured their approach, turning a suicide mission into a viable operation. Syndulla's expression was unreadable. That's actually brilliant. The timing would be tight, but it could work. She looked at Tion. He did this in under a minute. I told you, Tion said quietly. He's different. Luke was studying Spock with renewed interest, and Spock's tricorder registered the force energy around the young man intensifying. You can just see all that? How things connect. Pattern recognition and tactical analysis are fundamental skills. Your military strategists should have identified this approach through systematic evaluation. Our military strategists are exhausted, outnumbered, and running on limited resources, Syndulla replied, though her tone held no offense. We do the best we can with what we have. She paused, decision crystallizing behind her eyes. All right, Spock. You want information. We want to survive. Temporary alliance. You provide tactical consultation, we provide resources and whatever data we can access about spatial anomalies, hyperspace physics, anything that might help you get home. Deal? Spock considered. This aligned with his earlier logical assessment. The rebellion's cause, overthrowing tyrannical government, protecting civilian populations, was ethically defensible by Federation standards. His assistance would be limited to tactical planning, not direct combat, which minimized Prime Directive violations. Acceptable. However, I will not participate in operations targeting civilian populations or infrastructure. We don't target civilians, Luke said firmly. That's what the Empire does. Then we have no conflict. Spock turned back to Syndulla. I will need access to your database on hyperspace mechanics, detailed intelligence on Imperial technology, and any records of spatial anomalies in the past standard year. Done. Tion will set you up with quarters and database access. Syndulla extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Welcome to the rebellion, Spock. May the Force be with you. Spock accepted the handshake. I do not believe the Force operates through volitional intent, but I appreciate the sentiment. As Tion led him away from the command center, Spock heard Luke's voice behind him. He's going to fit in great here. Spock's eyebrow rose. He suspected the young Skywalker was being sarcastic. Interesting that even in a galaxy governed by mysticism and emotion, sarcasm remained a universal constant. Some things, apparently, transcended dimensional boundaries. Spock had been accessing the Rebel database for 6.4 hours when the energy signature appeared behind him. He didn't turn immediately. His tricorder, positioned on the desk beside the data terminal, registered the presence before his Vulcan hearing detected the nearly silent footsteps. The force readings were distinctive, controlled, powerful, but carrying what his sensors identified as corrupted harmonic patterns. Dark side in the terminology Tion had used. "You are not Rebel personnel," Spock stated, his hand moving casually toward his phaser. "Your energy signature is consistent with what my research identifies as dark side force manifestation." A low chuckle filled the small quarters. "Impressive. Most cannot sense me until I wish them to." Spock turned. The figure stood in the doorway, humanoid male, late 30s, wearing dark armor that incorporated both ceremonial and functional elements. Red and black markings covered his face, and his eyes carried a yellow tint that Spock's medical knowledge suggested indicated either biological mutation or sustained exposure to mutagenic energy. The lightsaber hanging from his belt was unmistakable. Red crystal, according to the database entries Spock had reviewed. Sith weapon. "I am Jarek," the intruder continued, stepping fully into the room. The door sealed behind him. Remote manipulation through the Force. "Former Jedi, current Inquisitor in service to the Empire, and you, Vulcan, are the most fascinating discovery I've made in years." Spock's tactical assessment was immediate. Enclosed space, opponent with demonstrated telekinetic abilities and lethal energy weapon. Unknown combat capabilities beyond database generalizations. His phaser remained holstered. Drawing it would trigger immediate combat before Spock could assess diplomatic options. "Your presence suggests the Empire has infiltrated this facility or tracked our arrival. The rebels should be alerted. They won't hear you. This room is now isolated, a simple force technique." Jarek moved closer, his movements predatory but not immediately threatening. "I'm not here to fight, Vulcan. I'm here to understand. You possess mental disciplines that register to force sensitives as empty, a void where consciousness should exist. Yet you clearly think, reason, act with intention. How is this possible?" Vulcan mental training creates psionic shields as a byproduct of emotional suppression. If your force abilities operate through psionic resonance, my mental barriers would appear as absence rather than presence. Jarek's smile widened. "Yes, precisely. And this makes you either completely immune to force manipulation or..." He paused, studying Spock with disturbing intensity. "The perfect vessel for learning techniques no Jedi or Sith has ever mastered." Spock's eyebrow rose. "You believe my mental architecture could be exploited for force training. This is illogical. I am not force sensitive. Everyone is connected to the force, every living being. But you..." Jarek gestured and Spock felt pressure against his mental shields, not aggressive but probing, testing. "Your mind is structured like a fortress, not through the Force, but through pure discipline. Do you understand what that represents? A Force user with your mental architecture would be unstoppable. Immune to manipulation, incorruptible by emotion, capable of wielding both light and dark without losing themselves to either. I have no interest in your Force abilities. Then you're a fool." The pressure increased. Spock felt the boundaries of his mental shields being tested, alien energy trying to find purchase against Vulcan discipline. The dark side offers power, Vulcan. Power to protect yourself in this hostile galaxy. Power to return home. The Empire has resources, hyperspace researchers, ancient Sith holocrons containing knowledge of dimensional rifts, even access to Force vergences that might replicate the conditions of your arrival. Spock considered this logically. The Inquisitor was offering information and resources in exchange for cooperation. However, the ethical implications were significant. The Empire practiced tyranny, xenophobia, and genocide. Aligning with them would violate fundamental Federation principles. Your offer assumes I prioritize returning home above ethical considerations. This assumption is incorrect. Jarek's expression shifted, not anger but fascination. You would refuse power that could save you? That's not logic, Vulcan. That's ideology. Ethics informed by logic are not mutually exclusive. The Empire's actions, systematic oppression, destruction of the Jedi Order, xenophobic policies are antithetical to civilized principles. I will not align with such governance regardless of personal benefit. How wonderfully naive. Jarek's hand moved to his lightsaber hilt. Then let me demonstrate what your civilized principles are worth in this galaxy. The crimson blade ignited with a snap hiss that Spock's tricorder registered as superheated plasma contained within a magnetic field. Temperature exceeding 20,000 degrees Celsius, lethal on contact. The Inquisitor moved with enhanced speed, force augmented, his combat style combining telekinesis with blade work that suggested decades of training. Spock drew his phaser and fired in one fluid motion. The blue stun beam struck Jarek's center mass. The Inquisitor staggered but didn't fall. His lightsaber swept up, and the next phaser blast was deflected by the energy blade, scattering harmlessly against the wall. Interesting weapon. Energy-based but not plasma. Let's see how many shots it takes to drain its power cell. Jarek advanced, lightsaber weaving defensive patterns that intercepted 3 more phaser blasts. Spock calculated rapidly. The weapon was effective but insufficient against a trained Force user with defensive capabilities. Close combat was required. He holstered the phaser and assumed a defensive stance, drawing from both Vulcan combat training and his Starfleet tactical education. Jarek laughed, genuine amusement in his voice. You think to fight a lightsaber with your bare hands? Your confidence exceeds your... Spock moved. Vulcan's speed and strength were significantly greater than human baseline. He closed the distance before Jarek could complete his attack arc, his hand finding the nerve cluster in the Inquisitor's wrist. The nerve pinch was perfectly executed. Jarek's grip on the lightsaber loosened but didn't release. His eyes widened, pain registering, neural disruption evident. But Force energy surged around him, maintaining consciousness through what should have incapacitated any humanoid nervous system. Impressive, Jarek gasped, his free hand extending. Telekinetic force slammed into Spock's chest, hurling him backward into the wall. Impact trauma registered. 2 ribs cracked, copper-based blood seeping internally. Painful but not immediately debilitating. The door exploded inward. Luke Skywalker stood in the entrance, his own lightsaber, blue blade, Jedi weapon, ignited and ready. Behind him, Tion and 3 rebel soldiers. Step away from him, Jarek, Luke commanded, his voice harder than Spock had heard before. The Inquisitor's yellow eyes flicked between Luke and Spock, calculating. Young Skywalker, the Emperor will be pleased to learn you're operating with the rebels. And this Vulcan... He smiled at Spock, despite the pain still evident in his expression. I will report your existence. The Empire will come for you, and when we do, you'll wish you'd accepted my offer. Jarek thrust his hand toward the viewport. The transparasteel shattered, explosive decompression sucking air from the room. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, but Jarek was already gone, Force leaping through the breach into the hangar bay beyond. Alarms shrieked. Luke rushed to Spock. Are you hurt? Injured but functional. 2 fractured ribs, moderate internal bleeding. Vulcan physiology will repair the damage within 72 hours. Spock stood despite the pain lancing through his torso. However, the Inquisitor now knows of my presence. The Empire will increase efforts to capture me. Tion looked grim. Not just capture. Jarek is obsessed with power and forbidden knowledge. If he believes studying you could unlock new Force abilities, he'll dedicate significant resources to taking you alive. Luke's jaw tightened. Then we need to move. This base is compromised. General Syndulla's voice crackled over the intercom. All personnel, prepare for emergency evacuation. Imperial fleet detected entering system. Estimate 15 minutes until arrival. This is not a drill. Spock processed the tactical situation. Jarek had somehow alerted Imperial forces, or his presence here was part of a larger operation. The rebels were now in immediate danger, and Spock's presence had contributed to the threat level. The logical course of action was clear, though not without ethical complexity. General Syndulla requires my tactical consultation during evacuation, Spock stated, already moving toward the command center despite his injuries. If the Empire has committed significant forces, standard retreat protocols will result in unacceptable casualties. Alternative strategies must be implemented immediately. Luke kept pace beside him. You're hurt. You should... I am functional. Logic dictates that my capabilities are most valuable now, when lives are at stake. Spock met Luke's eyes. You would do the same. The young Jedi's expression shifted to something like respect. Yeah, I would. They ran toward the command center as the entire asteroid facility trembled with the first impacts of Imperial turbolaser fire beginning to hammer the shields. Spock's mind was already calculating escape vectors, shield distribution patterns, and optimal evacuation sequences. The Empire had found him. Jarek would report his abilities to higher authorities, and somewhere in this vast galaxy, beings with power Spock couldn't yet measure were now aware of the Vulcan who analyzed the Force like a science experiment. Fascinating and extremely dangerous. The command center was controlled pandemonium. Officers shouted coordinates, engineers rerouted power to failing shield generators, and holographic displays showed 12 Imperial warships converging on the asteroid base with methodical precision. 2 Star Destroyers flanked by 10 support vessels, enough firepower to reduce the facility to debris within minutes if shields failed. Spock assessed the tactical situation in seconds. General, your current evacuation plan routes all vessels through the primary hangar. This creates a bottleneck that the Imperial forces will exploit. They're positioning TIE fighters to intercept any ship that exits the shield perimeter. Syndulla looked up from the tactical display, her expression tight. We don't have secondary launch options. The other hangar bays were damaged in the opening volley. Then we create one. Spock manipulated the holographic interface, highlighting a section of the asteroid's structure. This maintenance tunnel connects to the old mining shaft on the opposite side of the facility. If we explosively decompress this section, it would create a temporary exit point that Imperial forces are not currently monitoring. That tunnel isn't rated for starship passage, one of the engineers objected. It's barely 10 meters wide. Adequate for fighters and small transports if pilots maintain precise spacing. Larger vessels will need to use the primary hangar, but staggering the evacuation will prevent total loss if the bottleneck is compromised. Luke stepped forward. I can lead the fighter squadron through the tunnel. If Spock's math is right, mathematics are always right when properly applied, Spock interrupted. However, success requires the Imperial fleet's attention to be diverted during the critical evacuation window. They must believe we are attempting a different strategy. Syndulla's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting a feint. Precisely. A single vessel, ideally one that appears to be carrying critical intelligence or high-value personnel, makes an obvious escape attempt through the primary hangar. Imperial forces will concentrate fire and pursuit on that target allowing the main evacuation to proceed through the alternate route. "A suicide mission," Tion said quietly. "Whoever flies that ship won't make it." "Not necessarily." Spock's fingers moved across the tactical display. "If the decoy vessel uses the asteroid field's magnetic interference to mask its true trajectory, and times its hyperspace jump to coincide with the Imperial fleet's repositioning, survival probability increases to 34%. 34%? Syndulla shook her head. "I can't ask someone to take those odds." "You do not need to ask." Spock turned from the display, meeting her gaze directly. "I will pilot the decoy vessel. My presence is the reason the Empire has committed such significant forces to this attack. Logic dictates that removing me from the evacuation increases overall survival rates." "No." Luke's voice was firm. "You don't know how to fly our ships. I learned your weapon systems in minutes and destroyed a TIE fighter on my first attempt. I am capable of piloting adequately with proper instruction." Spock's tone remained even despite the pain from his fractured ribs. "Moreover, Jarek's interest in me ensures Imperial forces will prioritize my capture. This makes me the optimal decoy." Tion placed a hand on Spock's shoulder. "There's logic, and then there's foolishness. You're injured in an unfamiliar galaxy with nothing to lose except my life, which is already at significant risk remaining here." Spock looked at each of them in turn. "I am not being self-sacrificing. I am calculating the most efficient use of available resources. If my sacrifice increases group survival probability, it is the logical choice." The asteroid shuddered under another barrage. Shield strength dropped to 52% on the primary display. Syndulla made her decision. "All right, but you're not going alone." She turned to Luke. "Skywalker, you'll co-pilot. Your Force abilities give you the best chance of sensing Imperial tactics before they execute them. General, I should lead the fighter evacuation. Commander Raylan can handle the fighters. You're with Spock." Syndulla's tone brooked no argument. "Take the Ghost. It's the fastest ship we have, and it's got enough shielding to survive at least a few direct hits. Make the Empire chase you halfway across the sector if you have to, but come back alive." Luke hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, General." Spock found this arrangement acceptable. Skywalker's Force abilities might indeed improve survival probability, and having a skilled pilot to handle atmospheric maneuvering while Spock focused on tactical calculations was logical. They had 8 minutes before shield failure. The Ghost was a VCX-100 light freighter with non-standard modifications that Spock's engineering assessment tagged as both brilliant and dangerous. Enhanced engines, upgraded shield generators, and weapon systems that significantly exceeded civilian specifications. Someone had transformed this vessel into a hybrid combat transport. "This was Syndulla's ship," Luke explained as they rushed through pre-flight. "Before she became a general, she flew with a crew of, well, they called themselves the Spectres. Fought the Empire when most people didn't think fighting was possible." Spock settled into the co-pilot seat, his hands moving across unfamiliar controls with systematic efficiency. A single ship crew against an empire. Statistically improbable strategy. They won more than they lost. Luke initiated engine startup, his movements practiced despite obvious tension. Sometimes the Force guides people to do things that logic says are impossible. Or they succeeded despite relying on mysticism rather than because of it. Spock located the weapon systems. "I am routing tactical controls to this station. You handle piloting. I will manage defensive and offensive systems." "Works for me." Luke opened the comm channel. "Command, Ghost is ready for launch, waiting for your signal." Syndulla's voice crackled through. "Acknowledged, Ghost. Detonation charges are set on the mining tunnel. All personnel are evacuating to designated launch points." You are clear to begin your run in 90 seconds. May the Force... General, Spock interrupted. Before we proceed, I wish to note that while I calculate survival probability at 34%, this figure does not account for variables I cannot yet quantify. The Force, if it indeed operates through mechanisms beyond standard physics, may influence outcomes in ways my projections cannot predict. A pause. Then Syndulla's voice, softer. Are you saying you're hoping the Force is real, Spock? I am saying that unknown variables should be acknowledged in any probability assessment. Hope is not required, merely intellectual honesty regarding gaps in data. Luke grinned despite the tension. That's the most Spock way of saying, "May the Force be with us," I've ever heard. Countdown to launch, 60 seconds, Syndulla announced. All evacuation teams prepare for tunnel decompression on my mark. Spock's hands moved across the weapons console, familiarizing himself with firing solutions and shield distribution controls. His ribs ached with each breath, but Vulcan discipline allowed him to partition the pain into a separate mental compartment. Discomfort was irrelevant when survival required complete focus. 30 seconds. Luke's hands tightened on the flight controls. Spock noted the young man's force energy intensifying, not panic, but heightened awareness, preparing for combat. 15 seconds. Tunnel charges armed. The hangar bay doors began opening, revealing the star-filled void beyond, and the distant silhouettes of Imperial warships beginning their bombardment runs. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark. The Ghost shot from the hangar like a projectile, Luke's piloting, pushing the engines to maximum thrust immediately. Behind them, explosive charges detonated throughout the mining tunnel, creating a shower of debris and a gaping exit point that rebel fighters began streaming through, even as Imperial sensors struggled to track the sudden chaos. 2 Star Destroyers immediately altered course toward the Ghost, recognizing the vessel's trajectory as an escape attempt. TIE fighters swarmed like insects, their distinctive ion engines screaming as they converged. "Here they come," Luke muttered, sending the Ghost into a diving spiral. Spock tracked incoming fire vectors. 12 TIE fighters in pursuit, 4 more breaking off to intercept, shield strength at 100%. Suggest we maintain current heading until they commit fully to pursuit, then execute evasive maneuver Delta 7. We don't have a maneuver Delta 7. We do now. I am transmitting the pattern to your navigation computer. Luke glanced at the display, his eyes widening. That's insane. We'll be flying through debris at speeds that... We'll destroy any TIE fighter attempting to follow, yes. Their structural integrity is insufficient for the stress forces involved. What about our structural integrity? The Ghost has reinforced hull plating and superior shield distribution. Survival probability is 78%, assuming your piloting skills are as exceptional as others suggest. Luke laughed. Actual laughter despite laser fire streaking past the viewport. You really know how to motivate people, Spock. I am simply stating facts. A turbo laser blast from the lead Star Destroyer grazed their shields. The Ghost shuddered, shield strength dropping to 87%. Execute evasive maneuver Delta 7, Spock commanded. Now. Luke's hands danced across the controls, and the Ghost plunged toward a dense debris field, remnants of ancient mining operations mixed with destroyed vessels from previous battles. The freighter twisted through gaps barely wider than its hull, engines screaming, structure groaning under the strain. Behind them, TIE fighters attempted pursuit. 3 exploded against debris they couldn't avoid. 2 more collided with each other, trying to match the Ghost's impossible trajectory. The survivors broke off, unwilling to risk the suicidal course. But the Star Destroyers maintained pursuit, their massive bulk plowing through obstacles that would destroy smaller vessels. They were relentless, methodical, and terrifyingly patient. "Jump to hyperspace," Luke suggested, voice tight. "Negative. The Imperial fleet is deploying interdiction fields. I am reading gravity well, projections that will prevent hyperspace translation within this system." Spock studied the tactical display. "We must reach the system's edge before the field fully activates. Estimate 7.3 minutes. And they'll be shooting at us the entire time." "Correct." Another turbo laser barrage hammered their shields, 62% remaining. The Ghost's alarms shrieked warnings. Environmental controls flickered. Luke sent them into another spiral, buying seconds. "Spock, I don't mean to doubt your calculations, but this doesn't feel like 34% survival odds." That was the initial assessment, accounting for our successful navigation of the debris field and the reduction in pursuing fighters. Probability has increased to 41%. "Oh well. In that case," Luke's sarcasm was evident even through his concentration. "Maybe your logic should account for the Force, because something tells me we're going to need it." Spock observed as Luke seemed to anticipate incoming fire patterns before they materialized, weaving through turbo-laser barrages with precision that exceeded probability-based prediction. The Force, providing precognitive awareness that Spock's tricorder registered as temporal distortions in the quantum field around Skywalker's neural patterns. Fascinating, and impossible by all established physics, yet demonstrably real. "Luke," Spock said as they cleared the debris field with 5 minutes remaining to reach the hyperspace jump threshold, "I am beginning to understand why your people trust the Force. What you are doing, reacting to events before they occur, violates causality as I understand it, yet it is effective. Yeah, well, sometimes the impossible is just the possible that hasn't been figured out yet." Luke grinned. "A wise Jedi told me that." "Sort of." The Star Destroyers continued their pursuit, relentless and unyielding. But the Ghost was faster, and Luke's Force-guided piloting kept them milliseconds ahead of destruction. 34% had been pessimistic, Spock calculated. Perhaps 41% was as well. Perhaps, if he allowed for variables that logic alone could not predict, perhaps they would survive this after all. 4 minutes to hyperspace threshold. The Ghost shuddered under another turbo-laser barrage, shields dropping to 43%. Warning alarms created a discordant symphony that Spock found increasingly difficult to filter from his consciousness. His injured ribs had deteriorated from painful to severely debilitating. Internal bleeding was worsening, and even Vulcan physiology had limits. "We're not going to make it," Luke said, voice strained. Not panic, just tactical assessment. "Even with the Force, I can't dodge this much firepower forever. They're learning my patterns." Spock analyzed the tactical display. The Star Destroyers had adjusted formation, creating crossfire zones that limited evasive options. 16 TIE fighters had reinforced from the second destroyer. The interdiction field was fully active, no hyperspace escape until they cleared the gravity wells. "You are correct," Spock replied. "Therefore, we must alter our tactical approach. We cannot outrun them. We must convince them we are no longer worth pursuing." "How exactly do we do that?" Spock's fingers moved across his console. "By appearing to suffer catastrophic systems failure. If the Empire believes we are disabled and drifting, they will dispatch boarding craft rather than continue weapons fire. During the boarding approach, we restore systems and execute emergency jump before they can reinitiate weapons lock." Luke glanced at him. That might actually work, but we'd need perfect timing. If they decide to just destroy us instead of boarding, Jarek wants me alive. He reported my capabilities to Imperial Command. They will attempt capture before destruction. Spock began shutting down non-essential systems. "Trust my assessment, Luke. This will function. You want me to trust your logic over the Force? But Luke was already adjusting course, heading toward a dead zone between Imperial firing solutions. All right, Spock. I hope Vulcan intuition is as good as the Force. Vulcans do not have intuition. We have probability calculations based on observed data. Sure, let's call it that. Spock initiated the shutdown sequence. Primary engines powered down. Shields collapsed completely. Artificial gravity flickered. The Ghost began tumbling through space, all external indicators suggesting catastrophic failure. Only emergency life support remained active, and that Spock was masking beneath background radiation signatures. Through the viewport, the lead Star Destroyer slowed its approach. Spock's tricorder registered intense scanning beams washing over their hull. The Empire was verifying the damage, ensuring this wasn't a ruse. TIE fighters closing in, Luke whispered. 6 approaching from starboard. They're not firing. Excellent. They believe we are disabled. Spock watched the tactical display. Boarding shuttle launching from the destroyer. ETA 90 seconds. Those 90 seconds felt interminable. The Ghost drifted through the void, powerless and vulnerable. TIE fighters circled like scavengers. The boarding shuttle, a Lambda-class craft carrying what Spock's sensors indicated were 20 stormtroopers plus 1 officer with significant Force presence, approached with methodical caution. 60 seconds, Spock announced. His hands hovered over the restart controls. Prepare for immediate acceleration upon system restoration. I have pre-programmed optimal escape vector into navigation computer. The interdiction field will require 0.7 seconds to re-establish full effectiveness once we begin moving. Sufficient time for hyperspace calculation if you initiate jump immediately upon my command. Luke's hands tightened on the flight controls. This is crazy. It is logical. Those aren't mutually exclusive, apparently. 30 seconds. The boarding shuttle was close enough that Spock could see individual viewports. Stormtroopers visible inside, weapons ready. The officer, Jarek himself, Spock realized. The Inquisitor had personally joined the boarding party. He truly was obsessed with capturing Spock alive. 15 seconds. The shuttle extended docking clamps. Now, Spock commanded. Systems erupted back to life. Engines roared to full power. Shields snapped into place at maximum strength. The Ghost accelerated with violence that would have killed unrestrained passengers. Both Spock and Luke were thrown against their restraints as G-forces exceeded safety parameters. The boarding shuttle tumbled away, its docking clamps missing by centimeters. TIE fighters scrambled to reacquire weapons lock. The Star Destroyers began firing, but the Ghost was already outside optimal targeting solutions. Jump! Now! Spock shouted, actual emotion entering his voice for the first time since arriving in this galaxy. Luke's hands flew across the controls. The hyperspace calculation completed with incredible speed, Force-guided mathematics that Spock's analytical mind couldn't quite process. The lever pulled forward. Stars stretched into infinite lines. The Ghost translated into hyperspace 1.2 seconds before the interdiction field could reinitialize. Silence. The strange, tranquil silence of hyperspace travel, broken only by the hum of functioning systems and both pilots' heavy breathing. "We made it," Luke said, disbelief evident. "We actually made it." Of course, the probability was 41%. Spock checked their course. "We are traveling toward the coordinates General Syndulla provided as the secondary rendezvous point. ETA 4 hours, assuming no Imperial interdiction." Luke laughed, slightly manic laughter born of survival against impossible odds. 41%. You said it like it was a sure thing. It was not a sure thing, it was simply the most likely outcome given available strategies. Spock paused. However, I acknowledge that your Force abilities contributed significantly to our survival. The precognitive evasion, the accelerated hyperspace calculation, these exceeded what logic alone could have provided. Is that Spock's way of saying thank you? It is Spock's way of acknowledging observable data. Luke's expression softened. You know, for someone who doesn't believe in the Force, you worked pretty well with it just now. Trusting timing you couldn't calculate, relying on factors you couldn't measure. I trusted your capabilities, not mysticism. There is a distinction. Is there? Luke settled back in his seat, fatigue evident. Spock, what you did back there. Analyzing the Empire's psychology, predicting Jarek's behavior, timing that shutdown to the second. That wasn't just logic. You understood how people think, how they feel. Fear, ambition, obsession. You used those emotions against them. Spock considered this. It was accurate. He had indeed leveraged Jarek's obsession, the Empire's arrogance, and the Stormtroopers' trained behaviors. All emotional responses, all predictable patterns that logic could analyze and exploit. Emotion creates patterns, Spock said slowly. These patterns can be systematically analyzed and predicted. I am not engaging with emotion. I am engaging with its logical consequences. Maybe, or maybe you understand people better than you think. Luke checked their systems. 2 of our shield generators are fried. Hull plating has microfractures in 6 locations. We're flying, but we need repairs. Agreed. Additionally, my injuries require medical attention. Internal bleeding has stabilized but not ceased. Spock retrieved his tricorder, scanning himself. Vulcan healing trance would accelerate recovery, but I am unfamiliar with your medical facility's capabilities. The rebels have medical droids. They can handle most injuries, though I'm not sure they've ever treated a Vulcan before. They will adapt. Improvisation appears to be a primary rebel characteristic. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both processing the combat they'd survived. Hyperspace streamed past the viewport, impossible, beautiful, completely contradicting everything Spock understood about physics, yet undeniably real. Spock, Luke said eventually. Back on the asteroid, you said your presence put everyone at risk. You were willing to sacrifice yourself to increase their survival odds. That's not just logic. That's caring about people you barely know. It was tactical optimization. It was compassion. Spock turned to face him directly. Luke, I am Vulcan. We have suppressed emotion for millennia. Whatever you perceived as compassion was simply logic informed by values, Luke interrupted gently. You said ethics and logic aren't mutually exclusive. Well, compassion and logic aren't either. You can calculate all the probabilities you want, but you chose to risk yourself for others. That's what Jedi do. That's what good people do. Spock found himself without immediate rebuttal. The statement was uncomfortable because it contained elements of truth he'd been carefully avoiding. He had chosen personal risk to maximize group survival, but the choice itself, prioritizing others' lives over his own, was that purely logical? Or had his half-human heritage influenced the decision in ways his Vulcan training insisted should not exist? I require time to meditate on this, Spock said finally. Your philosophical framework is challenging established mental disciplines. Luke smiled. The Force has a way of doing that. It asks questions that don't have purely logical answers. All questions have logical answers if sufficient data is available. Then maybe you don't have all the data yet. Spock's eyebrow rose. The young human was surprisingly perceptive. More importantly, he was correct. Spock had operated in this galaxy for less than 1 standard day, yet had already encountered phenomena his science couldn't fully explain, observed Force abilities that violated causality. and experienced tactical situations where emotion-based predictions proved as valuable as mathematical analysis. The variable he hadn't accounted for was that logic itself might be insufficient in a universe where the Force existed. The thought was simultaneously disturbing and fascinating. When we reached the rendezvous point, Spock said, "I wish to continue studying the Force, not to use it, but to understand it. If I am to survive in this galaxy, I must comprehend the fundamental forces that govern it, including those that transcend conventional physics." "I can help with that," Luke offered. "I'm still learning myself, but what little I know, I'd be happy to share." "That would be acceptable." The Ghost continued through hyperspace, carrying two unlikely allies toward whatever awaited at the Rebel rendezvous. Behind them, the Empire now knew of Spock's existence. Jarek would report everything: the Vulcan's mental disciplines, his tactical brilliance, his strange technology, his immunity to Force manipulation. And somewhere in the vast Imperial bureaucracy, beings with power Spock couldn't yet measure would be making decisions about how to respond. The chase was far from over. In fact, Spock calculated it had only just begun. But for now, they had survived. Against 41% odds, they had survived. Sometimes Spock was beginning to suspect survival required more than logic alone. Sometimes it required trusting allies, accepting unknown variables, and allowing for the possibility that the impossible was simply the possible that hadn't been calculated correctly. Even a Vulcan could learn from experience. Even logic could evolve. The Rebel rendezvous point was a converted medical frigate designated Redemption, hanging in the shadow of a nebula that masked sensor signatures from Imperial patrols. 23 vessels had survived the asteroid base evacuation, less than half their original fleet strength, but far more than would have escaped without Spock's tactical intervention. General Syndulla met them in the Redemption's hangar bay, her expression relief mixed with exhaustion. "You're alive. I calculated your survival at maybe 20%. My assessment was 34%, revised to 41% during execution," Spock replied as he disembarked. His movements were deliberate, controlled, masking the pain from his injuries. "Your estimate was pessimistic. Glad to be wrong." Syndulla gestured to medical personnel waiting nearby. "Get to the medical bay. Dr. Cray has been briefed on your physiology." Tiani provided what information he could extrapolate from his Force reading of your biology. Spock found this approach logical, acceptable. "However, I require debriefing regarding the evacuation casualties and Imperial fleet disposition following our escape." "After medical treatment, that's an order, not a suggestion." Luke intervened, placing a hand on Spock's arm. "She's right. You're injured. Even Vulcan healing has limits. Let them help you." The medical bay was surprisingly sophisticated for a resistance movement operating with limited resources. The medical droid, a 2-1B surgical unit, approached with scanning equipment that, while primitive by Federation standards, showed competent design. "Greetings, I am 2-1B. Please recline on the examination table. Your species presents unique physiological challenges that will require adaptive treatment protocols." Spock complied, allowing the droid's scanners to map his internal injuries. The cracked ribs, internal bleeding, and minor tissue damage were catalogued with efficient precision. As the droid began treatment, sealing blood vessels, injecting bone-knitting compounds, and administering cellular regeneration accelerants, Spock accessed the data terminal beside the examination table. The Rebel database contained extensive files on Imperial operations, Jedi history, Force philosophy, and technological specifications. But what captured Spock's attention were the scattered reports of spatial anomalies, hyperspace disturbances, and dimensional phenomena across the galaxy. 17 documented cases in the past standard year of ships experiencing impossible hyperspace translations. 3 reports of vessels appearing without hyperspace wake signatures. 5 instances of localized temporal distortion near force vergences. And 1 ancient Jedi text reference to the world between worlds, a mystical nexus that existed outside normal space-time. Spock's analytical mind engaged with the data. If his arrival had resulted from the intersection between Federation subspace technology and this galaxy's hyperspace mechanics, understanding that intersection was critical for any potential return. The force vergences showing temporal distortion were particularly intriguing. If the Force truly operated outside conventional physics, it might serve as a bridge between realities. "Your physiology is fascinating," 2-1B commented as he worked. "Copper-based blood, redundant organ systems, neural pathways configured for extreme mental discipline. You are remarkably resilient, though I recommend 48 hours rest for optimal recovery." Noted. However, immediate rest is not tactically feasible given current threat assessment. The droid's optical sensors focused on Spock. "I am programmed to emphasize that organic beings frequently underestimate their physical limitations. Your logic may be sound, but your body requires time to heal." A logical observation. Spock appreciated the droid's straightforward approach. No emotional appeals, simply factual medical assessment. "I will moderate my activity accordingly." Tion entered the medical bay as treatment concluded, his weathered face showing concern. "How is he?" "Recovering adequately. Vulcan physiology is efficient." Spock sat up, testing his mobility. The pain had diminished to manageable levels. "I have been analyzing the database entries regarding spatial anomalies. There are patterns suggesting the Force interacts with dimensional boundaries in measurable ways." "You're already researching how to leave?" Tion's tone carried something Spock identified as disappointment. "I am researching all available data, whether I attempt to return to Federation space or remain in this galaxy. Understanding the mechanism of my arrival is scientifically imperative." Luke appeared in the doorway. "Spock, Syndulla wants you in the command center. Something's happened." The command center buzzed with tense activity. Syndulla stood before the central holographic display, studying transmission data with General Riekan, a senior rebel commander Spock hadn't yet encountered. Both looked grim. "Spock, you need to see this." Syndulla activated a holographic recording. Jarek's face materialized, his scarred features twisted with barely controlled rage. The transmission was directed at all Rebel-controlled frequencies, a galaxy-wide broadcast. "Attention, Rebel Alliance and all who harbor them. The Empire seeks a fugitive, a non-human designated Spock, species unknown, possessing technology and mental capabilities of significant Imperial interest. Any individual or organization providing sanctuary to this fugitive will be classified as enemies of the Empire and subject to immediate military action." The hologram shifted, showing sensor readings from Spock's tricorder, medical scans, and tactical footage of him analyzing Imperial formations. The Empire had compiled comprehensive data during their brief encounter. "This individual is extremely dangerous," Jarek continued. "Do not attempt to engage directly. Report sightings to Imperial authorities immediately. A reward of 500,000 credits has been posted for information leading to his capture, alive only. The Emperor himself has taken personal interest in this matter." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Every officer present was looking at Spock. "The Emperor," Riekan said slowly. "Palpatine himself wants you. That's unprecedented for someone outside the Jedi Order or high-level Rebel command." Spock processed the implications. Jarek reported my immunity to force manipulation. An individual who cannot be mentally influenced represents a significant threat to a force-using autocrat. Additionally, my analytical approach to the Force likely intrigues someone who has studied it for decades. They'll send everything they have to capture you, Syndulla stated. Inquisitors, bounty hunters, entire fleets if necessary, and anyone helping you becomes a target. The logical conclusion was clear. Then I should leave Rebel protection immediately. My presence endangers your entire organization. No. Luke stepped forward, his voice firm. We don't abandon people just because protecting them is dangerous. That's what the Empire does. Luke's right, Tion added. You helped save lives during the evacuation. You're not a liability. You're an asset the Empire fears. That makes you exactly the kind of person the rebellion needs. Spock evaluated their arguments, emotionally motivated but strategically valid. His tactical capabilities had proven effective. His immunity to force manipulation was indeed threatening to the Empire, and most significantly, the rebellion represented the best alliance available in this galaxy for someone committed to opposing tyranny. Very well, Spock said. However, we must acknowledge that my presence fundamentally alters Rebel strategic calculations. The Empire will allocate disproportionate resources to my capture. This can be exploited. Syndulla's eyes narrowed with interest. Exploited how? By using me as bait. Spock moved to the tactical display, manipulating the star charts. If the Empire commits significant forces to pursuing me, those forces are unavailable for other operations. We can manipulate Imperial deployments, draw ships away from critical targets, and create opportunities for strategic Rebel victories. You want to make yourself a target deliberately? Rikan looked skeptical. That's suicidal. It is logical. I am already targeted. Utilizing that fact strategically transforms a liability into an advantage. Spock highlighted several Imperial strongholds. Additionally, pursuing me may lead Imperial forces into situations where they are vulnerable. We control when and where they find me, or believe they have found me. Luke was studying the tactical display with growing understanding. Decoys, false intelligence, making them chase ghosts while we hit real targets. Precisely, though occasionally, I would need to genuinely appear to confirm the intelligence's credibility. The Empire must believe they are truly pursuing me, not phantom signals. Syndulla exchanged glances with Rikan. The senior commander spoke first. It's risky, but it might work. The Empire's obsession could become their weakness. Every obsession becomes a weakness eventually, Tion observed. The dark side teaches that lesson repeatedly. Jarek's fixation on Spock, the Emperor's interest, these are exploitable vulnerabilities. Then we're agreed? Syndulla looked around the room. Spock becomes an active Rebel operative. We use Imperial interest in him to our tactical advantage. But she fixed Spock with a commander's stare. You follow orders. You're brilliant, but you're not experienced with our operations. Can you accept command authority? Spock considered. In Starfleet, he served under Captain Kirk's command, trusting his superior officer's judgment even when disagreeing. The principle was transferable. I can accept logical command structures. However, I reserve the right to present alternative tactical analysis when I believe current strategies are suboptimal. Fair enough. Syndulla extended her hand. Welcome to the Rebellion, Commander Spock. Officially, this time. Spock accepted the handshake, the human gesture of alliance repeated across civilizations and apparently across realities. I am a science officer, not a commander. You are now, Rikan said with a slight smile. We just promoted you. Congratulations. As the meeting continued, planning initial operations that would leverage Spock's newfound notoriety, he found himself experiencing something he hadn't expected upon arriving in this chaotic, illogical galaxy. Purpose. He was needed here. His skills, his logic, his unique perspective, all were valuable to people fighting against oppression. The Prime Directive technically no longer applied since he'd already substantially interfered, and the cause itself was ethically sound by Federation standards. More importantly, he was beginning to understand this galaxy's fundamental truth. Logic and the Force were not opposites. They were complementary tools for understanding reality. One measured what could be quantified, the other perceived what transcended measurement. Both were necessary, both had value. Spock. Luke approached as the meeting dispersed. I've been thinking about what you said, about studying the Force scientifically. I'd like to help with that. Maybe if we combine your analysis with my connection to the Force, we could learn things neither Jedi nor scientists have discovered. An intriguing hypothesis. Collaborative research utilizing different methodological approaches often yields superior results. Spock paused. Additionally, I would benefit from understanding Force techniques that might help me survive encounters with dark side users. I can teach you what I know. It's not much, I'm still learning myself, but maybe your mental disciplines could interact with Force training in new ways. We shall see. Scientific inquiry requires empirical testing. Tion joined them, holocron in hand. If you're serious about understanding the Force, Spock, you should study this. It contains knowledge from a Jedi consular who specialized in the philosophical foundations of Force abilities. It might give you the theoretical framework your logical mind needs. Spock accepted the holocron, feeling the strange energy emanating from the crystalline device. His tricorder registered quantum fluctuations consistent with neural pattern encoding, yet the mechanism remained mysterious. I will study it thoroughly. Thank you, Tion. The old Jedi smiled. You know, when I first sensed your mind, I thought you were the most un-Force-like being I'd ever encountered. Now I think you might understand the Force better than most Jedi ever did, precisely because you refuse to accept it on faith alone. Understanding should never be based solely on faith when empirical investigation is possible. Maybe. Or maybe faith is just another word for trusting what you can't measure yet. Spock's eyebrow rose. An interesting philosophical position. I look forward to debating it further. As they dispersed, Spock made his way to the observation deck. The nebula's colors swirled beyond the viewport, hydrogen clouds ionized by stellar radiation, creating beauty through physics. Yet, somewhere in those clouds, the Force flowed as well. Energy that connected all living things, that transcended space and time, that made the impossible possible. He was stranded in an alien galaxy, hunted by an empire, allied with a desperate rebellion, and surrounded by mysticism his science couldn't fully explain. Logically, his situation was dire, yet he did not feel despair. He felt curiosity. And perhaps, though his Vulcan training insisted otherwise, perhaps he felt something else, something humans called hope. The galaxy was vast, the Force was mysterious, the Empire was powerful, but logic, applied correctly, could overcome any challenge. And if logic required accepting unknown variables like the Force, allies like Luke Skywalker, and causes like the Rebellion, well, even Vulcans could adapt. 3 weeks after Spock officially joined the Rebellion, the trap was set. The abandoned Imperial Research Station orbited a dead moon in the Outer Rim, a facility that intelligence suggested had been studying Force artifacts before being mysteriously evacuated. Perfect bait for an Inquisitor obsessed with forbidden knowledge and the Vulcan who could analyze the Force itself. Spock stood in the station's central laboratory, tricorder scanning ancient Sith texts that Tian had authentically placed to complete the illusion. Outside, rebel forces waited in carefully concealed positions. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Let Jarek find Spock alone and vulnerable, draw him into the station, then spring the trap. "I still don't like this," Luke's voice crackled through the concealed comlink. "You're exposed in there. If something goes wrong, then I will adapt. Logic accounts for contingencies." Spock continued his scans, documenting the Sith text's force energy signatures. Fascinating. The dark side left measurable resonance patterns in physical objects, suggesting quantum entanglement between matter and force manifestations. "Contacts," Syndulla's voice cut in. "2 Imperial shuttles inbound. Signature matches Inquisitor craft." He took the bait. "Acknowledged. Commencing final preparations." Spock positioned himself precisely where tactical analysis indicated Jarek would expect to find him. Hunched over ancient artifacts, apparently absorbed in research, presenting the image of a scientist vulnerable to ambush. His phaser was set to maximum stun, concealed within easy reach. His tricorder continued recording, though its primary function now was maintaining the illusion of distraction. The station's systems registered boarding. Footsteps echoed through corridors, multiple individuals moving with tactical precision, stormtroopers securing the perimeter, and one set of footsteps moving with force-enhanced speed directly toward the laboratory. Jarek entered alone, lightsaber unignited but ready, his yellow eyes fixed on Spock with predatory intensity. "You made this too easy, Vulcan. Alone, unguarded, absorbed in research like a child with a new toy. Did you truly think the Empire wouldn't find you?" Spock straightened, meeting the Inquisitor's gaze. "I calculated an 87% probability you would respond to intelligence suggesting I had discovered Sith artifacts. Your psychological profile indicates obsession with forbidden knowledge exceeds tactical caution." Jarek's expression flickered, surprise, then grudging respect. "A trap. But you're still here, which means either you're supremely confident or supremely foolish. Neither. I am logical." Spock's hand moved toward his phaser. "You will surrender. Rebel forces have surrounded this facility. Your stormtroopers are already being engaged. Let them try." Jarek's lightsaber ignited, crimson blade casting violent shadows. "But you and I, Vulcan, have unfinished business. Your mind, that fortress of logic, I will break it. I will prove that the Force transcends your precious reason." He attacked with frightening speed, force-augmented strikes designed to overwhelm. But Spock had spent 3 weeks studying Force combat techniques, analyzing recorded footage, calculating optimal defensive responses for someone without Force abilities facing a trained Darksider. He dodged the first strike, pure Vulcan reflexes. The second, anticipating the attack pattern from statistical analysis of Jarek's previous fights. The third, the laboratory door exploded inward. Luke Skywalker entered, blue lightsaber blazing, his presence in the Force like a sun compared to Jarek's controlled darkness. "You want to test someone with the Force?" Luke's voice carried newfound confidence from 3 weeks of intensive training under Tian's guidance. "Try me." Jarek pivoted, assessing this new threat. "Skywalker, the boy who destroyed the Death Star, your training is incomplete. You know nothing of true power." "Maybe, but I know enough." They clashed, light and dark, blue and red. Jedi legacy against Sith corruption. Spock observed the duel with scientific detachment, tricorder recording, every force fluctuation, every energy spike, every quantum probability shift as precognition influenced combat decisions. But this wasn't the primary objective. While Luke engaged Jarek, Spock moved to the station's central computer core. His fingers flew across the Imperial interface, 3 weeks of studying their systems paying dividends. He accessed the security protocols, the communication arrays, the facility's power distribution. "What are you doing?" Jarek snarled between strikes, sensing Spock's purpose even while fighting Luke. "Exploiting your weakness." Spock activated the station's override codes, provided by a rebel slicer who had spent 2 weeks decrypting Imperial encryption. "Your obsession with me caused you to commit forces to this operation, forces now trapped." The station's blast doors sealed, external communications jammed, power rerouted to containment protocols. The stormtroopers Jarek had brought were now isolated, cut off, facing rebel forces with overwhelming tactical advantage. And Jarek himself was caught between Luke's growing skill and Spock's systematic dismantling of his escape routes. "You cannot contain me!" The Inquisitor's power surged, dark side energy crackling around him. He thrust his hand towards Spock, force lightning arcing across the laboratory. Luke intercepted, lightsaber catching the lightning, absorbing the energy through techniques Spock had watched him practice obsessively. The young Jedi held firm, protecting Spock from an attack that would have killed him instantly. "That's the difference between us, Jarek," Luke said through gritted teeth. "I protect people. You just use them." Spock completed the final protocols. "Jarek, you have precisely 90 seconds before this facility's reactor overloads. Containment failures are cascading throughout the station. You can attempt to kill us, or you can flee before structural collapse. Choose logically." The Inquisitor's eyes widened, fury and calculation warring across his scarred features. His force senses confirmed Spock's assessment. The station was dying, systems failing exponentially. "This isn't over, Vulcan. The Emperor wants you. He will send everything. Vader himself if necessary. You cannot run forever." "I am not running. I am fighting." Spock met Jarek's yellow gaze without fear. "Your empire will fall. Mathematical inevitability. Tyranny always collapses under its own inefficiency." Jarek snarled, force leaping toward the exit with inhuman speed. Within seconds, he and his surviving forces were retreating to their shuttles, abandoning the station as reactor warnings shrieked through the corridors. "Time to go," Luke said, deactivating his lightsaber. "That was closer than I'd like." Calculated risk. The plan functioned within acceptable parameters. Spock gathered his equipment. The Rebel strike teams report successful capture of 17 Imperial personnel and significant intelligence data. The operation was a success. They evacuated to the waiting Rebel ships as the research station's reactor finally failed, consuming the facility in a brief, star-like explosion. From the Ghost's cockpit, Spock observed the destruction with satisfaction. Another Imperial asset eliminated, another tactical victory. But Jarek's words lingered. Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, the Dark Lord of the Sith, whose power reportedly exceeded every other Force user in the galaxy. If Spock had drawn that level of attention. "You're thinking about Vader," Luke said quietly, reading Spock's expression. "Wondering if you can beat him." "I am calculating probable outcomes of such an encounter. My analysis suggests survival probability would be significantly lower than previous engagements." "Maybe. But you're not alone anymore. You've got the rebellion. You've got allies. You've got..." Luke hesitated. "You've got friends, Spock. That counts for something." Friends. An emotional bond based on mutual respect and shared experience. Logically unnecessary, yet Spock found he could not entirely dismiss the concept's value. Luke, Tion, even General Syndulla, they had proven reliable, competent, and committed to principles Spock respected. Perhaps friendship was simply the emotional term for optimal alliance based on compatible values and demonstrated trustworthiness. Yes, that was a logical interpretation. Your friendship is acknowledged, Spock said carefully. It is a valuable tactical asset. Luke laughed, genuine, warm laughter. Only you could make friendship sound like a military resource, but I'll take it. They jumped to hyperspace, leaving the destroyed station and Jarek's humiliation behind. The rebellion awaited news of their success. More missions would follow. The Empire would escalate. Vader would inevitably appear. But for now, they had won. Logic had triumphed over dark side obsession. Careful planning had defeated superior force, and a Vulcan science officer stranded in an alien galaxy, hunted by an empire, allied with mystics who trusted in the Force, had proven that reason remained powerful even where mysticism reigned. The galaxy was vast. The war was far from over. Vader was coming. But Spock was no longer alone. He had allies, purpose, understanding that grew daily as he studied the Force through scientific methodology. And perhaps most importantly, he had hope. Not the emotional hope humans cherished, but the logical hope that came from observed evidence. That tyranny could be defeated. That different methodologies could work in harmony. That even in the most improbable circumstances, adaptation was possible. The Force flowed through the galaxy. But logic flowed through Spock. And together, mysticism and reason, emotion and discipline, the possible and the impossible, they would challenge an empire that believed itself invincible. The equation was complex. The variables were numerous. But Spock had always excelled at solving impossible problems. This galaxy would be no different. The months that followed transformed Spock from curious outsider to invaluable rebel operative. His tactical analyses consistently revealed weaknesses in Imperial strategies that emotion-driven planning missed. His immunity to Force manipulation made him the perfect operative for missions involving Inquisitors. And his growing understanding of the Force, approached through scientific methodology that Jedi had never considered, revealed insights that even ancient holocrons couldn't provide. He learned that midi-chlorians, the biological basis for Force sensitivity, operated through quantum entanglement with the Force itself. He discovered that dark side corruption created measurable neurochemical changes similar to addiction. He proved that Force precognition operated by accessing quantum probability fields, making it theoretically reproducible through sufficiently advanced technology. Luke became more than an ally. He became something humans called a friend, though Spock preferred optimal collaborative partner. Together, they developed hybrid techniques, Spock's logic identifying Force applications. Luke's intuition missed. Luke's connection to the Force revealing patterns Spock's science couldn't detect. They were stronger together than separately. The Empire's pursuit intensified. Jarek attempted 3 more captures, each ending in failure and humiliation. Bounty hunters arrived, drawn by the massive reward. All were defeated through combination of Vulcan capability and rebel teamwork. The Emperor's interest remained, and intelligence reports confirmed that Vader himself had been briefed on the logical Vulcan who analyzes the Force like mathematics. That confrontation was inevitable. Spock calculated it would occur within 6 months. He was not afraid. Fear was illogical, but he was prepared. And preparation, combined with allies who trusted both logic and the Force, created tactical advantages even the Empire's overwhelming power couldn't fully counter. Spock still sought a way home. His research into spatial anomalies continued, but he'd come to understand something profound. Home wasn't just a place, it was purpose, alliance, principles worth defending. The Federation felt distant, perhaps lost forever. But here, in this galaxy of mysticism and tyranny, of Force energy and rebel courage, Spock had found a new equation to solve. Not, how do I escape, but how do I help win? The rebellion needed his logic, the galaxy needed his perspective, and perhaps, though his Vulcan training still resisted the thought, perhaps he needed them as well. The Force whispered mysteries his science yearned to decode. The war offered challenges his tactical mind relished, and his allies provided something he'd never expected to find in an alien reality: belonging. Vader was coming. The Emperor watched. The Empire's full might would eventually focus on this stranded Vulcan who dared analyze their mystical power through scientific methodology. Let them come. Spock would be ready. Logic, after all, was the ultimate weapon. And in a galaxy that worshipped the Force, someone who could understand it without believing in it held an advantage no one had anticipated. The war continued. The mysteries deepened. The impossible remained achievable. Spock stood on the Redemption's observation deck, watching hyperspace stream past, tricorder recording data on Force energy fluctuations that accompanied faster-than-light travel. Beside him, Luke practiced Force meditation techniques, while Tion offered guidance from ancient texts. Different methodologies, complementary strengths, unified purpose. The equation was complex but solvable, and Spock had always excelled at solving the impossible. The galaxy would learn what Starfleet already knew: never underestimate a Vulcan's capacity for logic, adaptation, and, though he'd never admit it, loyalty to causes worth fighting for. May the Force be with you. More stories await.